In 1964, the year after mob turncoat Joe Valachi's famous testimony, Valachi's nephew, Genovese soldier Fiore Siano, was murdered, allegedly because of his uncle's betrayal. Let's check it out. Welcome to OC Shorts, bringing you detailed historical snapshots of the American Mafia and other organised crime. Feel free to subscribe if you like that sort of thing. Today, we're going to take a quick look at the murder of Joe Valachi's nephew, Genovese soldier Fiore Siano. In the spring of 1964, Genovese soldier Fiore Siano was in Patsy's pizzeria on 1st Avenue when he left with a small group of men and never seen again. According to information gathered by the New York City police, Siano disappeared about the end of April or the beginning of May 1964. He has not been seen since 3 unknown males took him out of Patsy's pizzeria, 2287 1st Avenue, during the aforementioned period. Siano is believed dead. The rumour is that his body was disposed of in such a manner as to prevent it from being discovered. So, what do we know about Fiore Siano, and why was he murdered? Fiore Siano was born in New York City on June 22nd, 1927. His mother was Filomena Siano, born Filomena Valachi, and she was the sister of Genovese family soldier Joseph "Joe Cargo" Valachi. The young Siano would follow his uncle into a life of crime. Sources indicate that in 1948, when Siano was around 21 years old, he received his first arrest for burglary. After this, his uncle, Joe Valachi, recruited the young Siano into organised crime, where he became an associate of what was known as the Luciano crime family, whose boss at the time was Frank Costello. Valachi would set up his nephew in the illegal narcotics business in East Harlem, which was dominated by the Italian crime families in the 1950s. In 1952, at the age of 25, Fiore Siano participated in the murder of Lucchese family soldier and international narcotics trafficker, Eugenio "Gene" Giannini. Giannini was an active informant, and after an arrest in Italy in 1951, had offered Charles Siragusa, the head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics Italian office, information on the drug dealing activities of deported mob boss Charlie Luciano. Giannini was released from jail in Italy and returned to the United States. However, Luciano had got wind of Giannini's relationship with the FBN and ordered his murder. I cover the life and times of Eugenio Giannini in greater detail in a previous video, and have posted the link to this in the comments below. And so, Charlie Luciano's order to kill Eugenio Giannini reached Vito Genovese, who at the time was the underboss to Frank Costello. Genovese then informed family captain Anthony "Tony" Bender Strollo. Tony Bender then told Joe Valachi about Giannini being an informer, and according to Joe Valachi's testimony, he volunteered to take on the contract. Valachi would then recruit his nephew, Fiore Siano, and brothers Joe and Pasquale Pagano to carry out the hit on Giannini. At the time, all 3 young men held the rank of mob associate. It was discovered that Eugenio Giannini was working for a crap game at a building on East 112th Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenues. An FBI file would further state, Valachi had instructed Joey Pagano, Pasquale Pagano, and Fiore Siano to find a building in the block of the crap game, East 112th Street, with egress through to East 111th Street, where the getaway car, driven by Joey Pagano, would be waiting. Valachi, looking over the plans, asked if they had physically checked out the route of escape through to East 111th Street, and was told they had not. Valachi called the plan off, despite the fact Giannini was even then in the social club. He and the 3 went to the former Ada Bar on 114th Street and 2nd Avenue, where Valacchi bawled them out. The following day, Pasquale Pagano checked the escape route, and Valacchi approved the plan. It should be noted that none of the three were then members of Cosa Nostra. They were then on their own to do the job, which they fulfilled about 2:30 a.m. on September the 20th, 1952, 3 days later. The night after the murder, Valacchi went to see Strollo at the Gold Key Club, and Strollo wanted to know what had happened to the 3 guns Strollo had furnished for the contract. Valacchi advised that he told Strollo he did not know, but would find out and tell him. Valacchi stated that one of the duties of a capo regime, such as Strollo, is to maintain weapons for the use of soldiers. The guns are usually new, retained by some trusted persons known to the capo regime, and weapons used on contracts are destroyed or thrown away. Valacchi stated that this is one of the purposes of taxing members of a family each month, to have such weapons available when needed. Valacchi stated he got in touch with Joey Pagano the next day and asked him about the guns. Pagano told him that the guns had been thrown off a bridge, and Valacchi believes he said the 3rd Avenue Bridge across to the Bronx, but cannot recall exactly. Pagano and he then went to Newark, New Jersey, where Fiore Siano was staying with friends. Siano told Valacchi that he and Pasquale Pagano had called Eugene Giannini out of the club and engaged him in conversation about the girl Jean he had dated. These were the last words he spoke as they shot him. The following year, 1953, Fiore Siano was involved in another murder. This time, the victim's name was Stephen France. France was from the Lower West Side and was associated with the powerful mobster Vito Genovese. And Stephen France ran Club 181, which was a gay bar. When Vito Genovese fled the United States on murder charges, sources suggest that Genovese entrusted Stephen France to keep an eye on his feisty wife Anna, who ran her own nightclub, the Caravan Club, and had a penchant for the nightlife. When Vito Genovese returned from Italy and beat his murder charge, rumours started circulating that Anna Genovese had had affairs with both men and women. Vito and his wife separated, and the headstrong Anna Genovese would even testify about how her criminal husband made his money in a very public and messy divorce case. However, despite her testimonies about his mob career, it is said that Vito couldn't bring himself to have her murdered, and instead focused his anger on Steve France, the man who he blamed for his wife's promiscuous behaviour. On June the 19th, 1953, Steve France was savagely murdered. As one newspaper reported, Stephen France, 55-year-old Greenwich Village nightclub manager, was strangled and beaten to death early yesterday, and his body left lying on the floor of his brand new sedan, which the killer or killers abandoned on heavily travelled East 37th Street just west of 3rd Avenue. France lay on the floor in the back seat of the car with his feet on the back seat. His pockets had been turned inside out. His right eye was blacked. There was a cut 1.5 inches long under his chin, and a mark around his neck from the strangler's fingers. An autopsy subsequently showed several fractured ribs on the left side and bruises all over the body. There was no evidence of any weapon having been used, according to Dominic J. Di Maio, Assistant Medical Examiner. Vito Genovese had given the order for Stephen France's murder, and the contract came to Joe Valacchi, who again used his nephew Fiore Siano and Pasquale Pat Pagano. As one FBI file states, Stephen France, formerly associated with the ex-wife of Vito Genovese, and was murdered on June the 19th, 1953, by Pasquale Pagano and Fiore Siano. At this point, Fiore Siano's stock in the underworld was on the rise. He had participated in 2 murders at the behest of powerful mobsters. The first, an order from Charlie Luciano, and the second from family underboss Vito Genovese. He had earned the nickname Fury, which was a play on his name Fiore, and also for his violent ways. Sources indicate that Fiore Siano was inducted into what would become known as the Genovese crime family in 1954, and was unsurprisingly sponsored into the life by his uncle Joe Valacchi. Siano became a soldier in the infamous Greenwich Village crew, under Captain Anthony Tony Bender Strollo. Then, in August 1954, Siano was arrested for drug dealing. One newspaper reported, 3 suspected dope pushers and a batch of cocaine and heroin seized yesterday in a raid on a Bronx rooming house by federal narcotics agents. The men, believed to be members of a Harlem dope gang, were held in $18,000 bail each by US Commissioner Isaac Platt for the grand jury on charges of illegal selling and possession of narcotics. The men were Fiore Siano, 27, of 2281 First Avenue, Angelo DeGeorge of 400 East 110th Street, and Joseph Ragone, 35, of 560 Brush Avenue, Bronx. It was in Ragone's room that the men and narcotics were seized, the raiders said. Fiore Siano was sentenced to 8 years in prison in November 1954. After Siano's release from prison, he continued his criminal career in the Genovese family's Greenwich Village crew. By this time, Joe and Pasquale Pagano had also been inducted and would serve in the same crew, alongside the likes of Vincent Gigante, Mario Gigante, Larry Dentico, and Bobby Manna, to name a few. In 1963, this crew was run by acting captain Pasquale Patsy Ryan Eboli, who had taken over from his brother Thomas Tommy Ryan Eboli, who was serving as acting underboss. It was in this same year that Fiore Siano's uncle Joe Valacchi provided his famous testimony about the secrets of Cosa Nostra. Some sources suggest that by 1964, the year after his uncle's famous appearance as a government informant, Fiore Siano walked around with a haunted expression. One person who used to play pool with him said of Siano in his final weeks, "Fiore seemed moody, like he had something on his mind." As previously mentioned, Fiore Siano was last seen in either late April or early May, leaving Patsy's Pizzeria on First Avenue with 3 men. 2 of these men are believed to have been the Pagano brothers, Joe and Pat. Fiore Siano was never seen again. One source states that after Valacchi's testimony, mob old-timers did not want Siano's bad blood infecting the family. Interestingly though, FBI files, based on information from an informant, state another reason for Siano's murder. The files show that Tommy Ryan Eboli had ordered his killing after Siano had been dealing drugs again, in breach of the crime family's rules. The file states, on April 26, 1964, Fiore Siano, a nephew of Joseph Valacchi in the Vito Genovese family, disappeared from his home in the East Harlem section of New York City and has not been seen since. NYT 41 advised that Fiore Siano was killed on the orders of Thomas Eboli, acting boss of the Genovese family, because Siano was handling junk. Whether this was just an excuse made up to kill Fiore Siano, who knows? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. I hope you found that interesting. Thanks for watching.